This month in the Tech News, you'll find a wide variety of features will bring you up to speed on what's new in the world of Mastertech. In the August issue, there are updates covering the progress of both WebLink and MDS 2002, along with an important ASE test announcement. An article about taking technical training on the road is also included, as is a feature on the winning questions for the Ultimate Race Weekend competition. Additionally, there are some training tips related to American Axles, the service and diagnostic software release list, and more. And be sure to catch a special video segment on the Ultimate Race Weekend competition immediately following this month's program.
Dodge Ram pickups have a well-deserved reputation for rugged durability. So when all new components are added to vehicle equipment, they must meet the highest quality standards. This month on Mastertech, we're going to highlight the new American axles that are used in Ram pickup 2500 and 3500 series for model year 2003. After completing this program, you'll be familiar with the components, operation, and service of the 9¼ 10½, and 11½-inch American axles. And you'll be able to identify each axle using information on the identification label. You'll also be familiar with the components, operation, and service of the standard and track-right helical differentials used in American axles. And we'll get some tips on removing the hubs on 10½ and 11½-inch rear axles. This program also covers inspection, analysis, and adjustment procedures for American axles, including the use of new special tools and the relevant service information sources. Although much of how you deal with these new axles is similar to what you've done in the past, American axles do have some specific characteristics that you need to know about. All new axles don't come along that often in Dodge trucks. So what you learn about American axles is likely to be applicable for several years. There are 3 new American axles, so let's take a look at each one. The 9¼ American front axle replaces model 248 FBI, also known as the Dana 60 front axle. Its ring gear diameter is 9¼ inches, or 235 millimeters. The 10½-inch American rear axle replaces models 248 RBI and 267 RBI, or what you may call the Dana 60 rear and Dana 70. This axle has a ring gear of 10½ inches, or 267 millimeters. The 11½-inch American rear axle replaces the 286 RBI, or Dana 80, and has single and dual rear wheel versions. Its ring gear diameter measures 11½ inches, or 292 millimeters. Each model is available with a gear ratio of either 3.73 to 1 or 4.10 to 1. American axles are currently used only in 2003 Dodge Ram 2500 and 3500 models. American axles are constructed of iron, and each is of a full floating design, which means that the axle shafts don't support the weight of the vehicle. Rear axles are available with either a standard or track-right limited slip differential. The pinion gear in the rear axles is mounted below the center line of the ring gear, while the front axle features above-center pinion mounting. When working with an American axle, you'll need to know some information about it, which can be found in 2 places. An identification label is originally applied to the axle tube during manufacture, but may or may not be present when the vehicle is in for service. The code on the label contains the manufacturer part number, revision level, and axle ratio. The ID label also lists build information such as the time, date, and manufacturing plant. If the label is not present, you can also find this information stamped into the axle tube. The ring and pinion gears and standard differential in American axles are not radically different from what you're used to seeing, but there are some specific items worth noting. American axles feature a pinion flange that is different from Dana and corporate axles. Like those in other axles, the ring and pinion gears are a matched set, There are no variance markings on the pinion gear. The triple lip pinion seal can be removed with a slide hammer or pry tool. In American axles with both types of differentials, threaded adjusters are used to set ring gear backlash and preload for the differential case bearings. The adjusters are located between the differential bearing cups and the housing and have holes to accept special tool number 8883, a spanner wrench that's used to set bearing preload and ring gear backlash. The adjusters have lock bolts that are used to secure the adjuster after preload and backlash are set. You'll see more about these adjustments later in the program. Other features include a pinion shim that is located between the pinion bearing and the pinion head, and a collapsible spacer that is used to set pinion bearing preload. The differential pinion shaft in rear axles is retained in the differential housing with a snap ring. To remove the pinion shaft from the case, you'll need to use a hammer and punch on the side of the shaft that has a hole. A new feature of American axles is the track-right helical differential used in the limited slip versions. The track-right differential has 6 helical differential pinion gears and 6 pinion brake shoes to divide and distribute torque. The track-right diff uses a 2-piece case and 2 side gears, and the lack of clutches makes it easier to disassemble and put back together. This differential is serviced only as an assembly, but can be taken apart for inspection and cleaning. Track-right differential components should be marked before disassembly and reassembled in their original locations. The design of the track-right helical differential makes diagnosis pretty straightforward. The vehicle won't move when a differential failure occurs. As far as lubrication goes, the fluid specified for American axles is different from axles used previously. Both front and rear models use synthetic gear lubricant as a factory fill. Unlike other limited slip differentials, no friction modifier additives are required. Lube specs can and do change, so consult the latest service information for the specific type, part number, and capacity. You should be aware that there is a 500-mile break-in period in which the vehicle shouldn't exceed 50 miles per hour under loaded conditions. In the next segment, we'll take a look at some procedures that outline the right way to diagnose and service American axles. According to the 6-step troubleshooting procedure, the first thing to do before chasing down an axle problem, or any concern for that matter, is to verify that the symptom is present. For axles, this usually means road testing the vehicle under conditions similar to what the customer described and confirming that a problem exists. This is usually some kind of noise-related issue, and the characteristics of the sounds you hear may indicate particular components as the cause. You'll also need to determine any related symptoms that may be caused by other rotating components, such as tires or the transfer case. With the helper driving, you can next analyze the symptoms using a chassis ear or similar tool to separate noises from different areas of the vehicle. Once you've determined that an axle noise does exist, you can isolate the cause. Axle noises are directly related to vehicle speed and can generally be classified into 3 categories: howl, growl, and whine. Howl is an oscillating sound associated with runout of rotating components. Growl is a low-pitched sound that is usually caused by bearings that are damaged or worn. Whine is higher pitched and is most often related to the mesh between the ring and pinion gears. For more about axle diagnosis, see TSB number 030599. This bulletin was originally released for 1999 and 2000 Jeep Grand Cherokee, but most of its road test information applies to all axles. You can also refer to the October 1999 Mastertech program that covered axle diagnosis. Much of that release is relevant to American axles. Whatever the nature of axle noise, an inspection is necessary to determine the problem. You most likely perform an inspection with the axle in the vehicle, but we can get a better look at the process on a stand-mounted unit. After removing the propeller shafts and axle shafts, perform a total torque to rotate test with an inch-pound torque wrench. Record the measurement and take note of any erratic torque readings. Next, remove the differential cover and inspect the fluid for signs of contamination. Look for bits or pieces of metal and for significant quantities of metal filings in the fluid, which indicate damage to components. Next, you should measure backlash and 8 points spaced equally around the ring gear. Because of their gear design, the correct backlash is critical for the operation of American axles. The backlash measurements should not vary by more than 0.02 of an inch to be within specification. If backlash variance is out of spec, there could be a runout problem with the ring and pinion gear or the differential case. Next, you should check the gear contact pattern by applying marking compound to the ring gear. The procedure is similar to other axles, but analyzing the pattern, which we'll cover later in the program, is a little different from Dana axles. Continue the inspection by removing the differential case and measure and record the pinion torque to rotate with the inch-pound torque wrench. Subtract this value from your TTR measurement to figure differential torque to rotate. Next, remove the pinion flange, and then use the appropriate pinion driver to remove the pinion gear. Then remove the pinion bearing and measure and record the thickness of the shim used to set pinion depth. As you probably know, setting the right pinion depth is crucial to making an axle operate smoothly. We'll cover this important step in the next segment. Remember that ring gear backlash measurements shouldn't vary by more than 0.02 of an inch in American axles. Correct pinion depth is critical to a smooth-running axle because it places the pinion gear at the proper position in the housing and allows it to mesh properly with the ring gear. Measuring for and selecting the right shim is the main part of setting pinion depth. Pinion depth special tools must be used to determine proper shim thickness. These tools may vary by axle model, but always include a dial indicator, pinion height block, pinion block, scooter block, arbor, arbor discs, cone nut, and screw. For American axles, existing essential special tools are used with some new ones. The new tools are listed in this month's reference book. All measurements are taken with the pinion bearing cups installed in the axle housing. To set up for the pinion depth measurement, assemble the pinion height block, and rear pinion bearing onto the screw. Insert the height gauge component assembly and rear pinion bearing into the housing through the bearing cups. Then install the front pinion bearing and tighten the cone nut hand tight. Measure the rotating torque of the tool in inch-pounds and compare it to the specification in the service information. Tighten or loosen the cone nut as needed to achieve the proper rotating torque. Next, place the arbor discs on the arbor and position them in the differential case side bearing cradles. Install the differential bearing caps over the arbor discs and tighten to specification. It's important to make sure that the arbor is able to rotate after installing the bearing caps. If it can't, check the alignment of the arbor discs in the bearing cradles. Attach the dial indicator to the scooter block and position them flush on the pinion height block. Then zero the dial indicator. Slide the scooter block slowly across the pinion height block to the arbor while watching the dial indicator. Do this a few times and record the highest reading. Select the pinion depth shim that is equal to the depth measurement you recorded. The shim is installed between the rear pinion bearing and the head of the pinion gear. Before putting the pinion in, install a new collapsible spacer and pinion seal. When installing the pinion, be sure to use Mopar Teflon sealant on the pinion flange splines, as well as a new pinion nut. Pinion preload is achieved by crushing the collapsible spacer. This may take up to 500 foot-pounds of torque, so use 3/4-inch drive tools. Another procedure crucial to the operation of American axles is adjusting backlash, which determines bearing preload and the gear contact pattern. As you saw earlier, backlash is set using threaded adjusters, which moves the differential case and ring gear closer to or farther from the pinion gear. For all American axles, the preferred backlash setting is between 5 and 7 thousandths of an inch. To set backlash, install the differential case into the axle housing and tighten the left adjuster until the ring gear is seated against the pinion. Then back off on the left adjuster 4 holes and install the adjuster lock and bolt. Do not tighten the adjuster lock bolt at this time. Next, rotate the right adjuster until it stops. Then rotate the differential case to seat the differential bearings. Loosen the right adjuster until it no longer touches the bearing cup, and tighten it back up until it seats again. Increase the preload on the differential case bearings by tightening the right adjuster 4 holes for used bearings or 6 holes for new bearings. When properly adjusted, the total torque to rotate measurement should be between 30 and 50 inch-pounds for new bearings or between 25 and 45 inch-pounds for used bearings. To confirm proper setup of the axle components, you can now perform the gear tooth contact pattern test. After wiping the ring gear clean, apply marking compound to both sides of all the ring gear teeth. Using a shop towel or similar method, create about 10 foot-pounds of pinion rotating torque. Rotate the pinion yoke and pinion 4 revolutions in each direction to ensure that a good gear contact pattern is established. Look at the pattern and compare it to the service information to determine if further adjustment is necessary. Be sure to use the middle of the pattern for analysis. Disregard the pattern's tail ends. The proper pattern confirms correct pinion depth and ring gear backlash. This example of an incorrect pattern indicates that the ring gear is too far away from the pinion. To correct this, use the adjusters to decrease backlash and move the ring gear closer. This contact pattern tells us the ring gear is too close to the pinion. So you need to increase the backlash to move the ring gear farther away. A pattern that looks like this means that the pinion gear is set too high. Confirm the pinion depth and change to a thinner shim if necessary. If the pinion gear is set too low, as this pattern shows, confirm the pinion depth and change to a thicker shim to correct it. After making adjustments or repairs, verify that it fixed the problem by road testing the vehicle. Refer to the 2003 DR service information for diagrams and complete procedures for making adjustments to American axles. Before we wrap up, I'd like to cover a couple of service-related items for these axles that you should know about. When removing the hubs on a rear axle, you'll notice that the bearing keeper uses a locking quarter key and retainer ring. You have to remove the retainer ring to get the keeper off, and make sure it's oriented properly when installing the hubs. The rear hub seal may separate into 2 pieces when the hubs are removed, part of which may remain on the axle tube. In any case, a new seal must be installed. Before installing the shaft bolts, clean the threads and bolt holes and apply some Loctite to the threads. In a separate item, all American axles have a reusable gasket for the differential cover. No RTV sealant is needed. In fact, no RTV sealant at all should be used with American axles. For specifics on servicing American axles, consult the service information that's available both in print and on MDS2. Group 3 of the service manual, which covers the differential and driveline, has separate sections for the 9 1/4, 10 1/2, and 11 1/2 inch American axles. As noted earlier, TSB number 030599 has in-depth information about axle diagnosis. You can also take an instructor-led course that covers American axles from the Daimler-Chrysler Academy School of Technical Training. Watch for a new course, Front and Rear Axle Diagnosis and Repair, number 0330216, which includes information about American axles in addition to Dana and corporate models. You can also review previous Mastertech releases, such as Axle Diagnosis from October 1999, or the February 1997 program titled Front and Rear Axle Service for further tips and techniques. Remember, too, that the Star Center is there to help you, either over the phone or via the Star Online case-based reasoning system on MDS2. That's all for this month's program. An inside look at Dodge's NASCAR Winston Cup Pit Crews, along with the highlights of the Mastertech Ultimate Race Weekend Contest, is coming up right now.
When it comes to excitement, intensity, and high drama at blazing speeds, nothing comes close to the awesome spectacle of NASCAR Winston Cup racing. Putting you right in the middle of the action is the idea behind the Mastertech Ultimate Race Weekend Competition. The challenge? Send the most insightful and interesting question you can devise for our Dodge Team crew chiefs. The reward? The opportunity of a lifetime to experience a Winston Cup race from the inside as a member of a Dodge race team. One winner has been chosen from each business center in the U.S. You'll see who they are a little later on. Our 5 winners have a thrilling weekend in store, culminating with an action-packed day at the legendary Michigan International Speedway for the annual running of the Pepsi 400. It's true that dealership service technicians and race team garage crews operate in very different environments. But if you look a little deeper, you'll see that many parallels exist between the important work you accomplish every day and wrenching on the fastest stock cars in the world. For example, service techs are as vital to the success of a dealership as pit and garage crew members are to the race team.
Every single person is very important because everything they touch on the car, we're relying on it, so it's very important.
It's real important for them to maintain a consistency of service on the car to get to the racetrack, and then they just care from it from there out to Sunday.
It's a big team, like any other business. It's a big team, and we depend on each other, and we lean on each other.
And as it turns out, a crew chief is somewhat like the service manager of a race team.
It's important for one guy to overlook a situation, and in any type of business, especially just like a service industry and a car dealership.
My job for the weekend is to keep the driver calm and make quick decisions and just communicate with the whole race team.
The crew chief's really just like a manager. He has to tie it all in together, make sure all the schedules are hit, all the technical applications are being put toward the cars in the right manner.
At the track and in the dealership, making rapid repairs is important.
The preparation that goes into these cars is very tedious. It has to be done quickly.
We as service people on our race cars is the same as service people on the street and working in those Dodge dealerships. Customers want to come in and have a 15-minute oil change. They want it done correctly.
In choosing the guys that work on the car, you have to get a guy that is, real meticulous, but also has the speed to be able to accomplish a job quickly.
But fast is never more important than getting it right the first time.
Service excellence at the racetrack. We preach in this garage area there is no margin for error, and everything we do has a time limit on it.
It's real important that we diagnose the problem, see if it's going to take a long time to fix. And if it is, go ahead and take the time to fix it.
So speed is very important, and the accuracy of them doing their job is important. If they don't get the part changed properly or whatever, that's downtime we have off the racetrack.
When our parts fail, it's on the racetrack, and the circumstance can be very high.
For both service techs and crew members, paying close attention to what the driver is saying is the key element in determining what action should be taken.
Input from the driver is very important. I mean, if the driver didn't have a whole lot of feedback, then we wouldn't know which end to attack on the race car.
Driver input is by far the best tuning device that we have.
Driver input has a very big impact on adjusting the car, because he's the one feeling what he has going on out there.
Just like working in the dealerships, if a customer doesn't come in and give good explanation of what's wrong with their vehicle when they're having a little bit of problems, it's hard for the mechanic to fix that problem.
The significance of his input is critical. It really is.
It's the most critical part of our whole weekend.
And whether you're part of a Dodge race team or a dealership service team, you need to have specialized skills to produce driver satisfaction.
We have a person that takes care of just the engine.
Everyone has their particular part of the car that they're supposed to tend to for the whole weekend.
We have one person that takes care of the rear of the car.
We call that their specialty.
The gear, the rear end housing, the rear brake.
In order to be the best at this level, everybody has to be professional.
And then also a person takes care of just the front end suspension.
And to do a job part-time, you don't always get everything out of that position, so everyone is a specialist.
So we have a person that takes care of just the inside, the electrical, the seat belts, the driver comfort area.
But that's not to say that being specialized places limits on the type of work you carry out. Being qualified to do it is what's important.
Every man on this crew can help another person, but we try to pick our most skilled employees to handle that job.
We have a couple of guys that sort of like the chief mechanic that oversee it, and they have a broad range of knowledge and can sort of overlap and troubleshoot.
We do specialize it out somewhat, but most of the guys are very well trained on the whole entire race car.
How do these guys stay at the top of their game? The same way you do, by continuously building their knowledge and skill.
We train on an everyday basis in every aspect of the car. We're constantly trying to learn things, and the technicians over at the service side and the Dodge dealers, me being part of a service dealership before, they were a constant schooling, monthly schooling.
Well, this sport changes about 10 times every 3 hours, so we constantly sending our shock men to new schools, whether in Sweden or wherever, to get updated on the shock technology. The motor men are constantly going off to various parts of the country.
Ongoing training is critical in what we do.
Our guys are continuously going through new training and going, seeing what's new out on the streets each and every week.
It's very important to keep the learning curve growing.
Crew members on the Dodge Motorsports race teams have reached the pinnacle of their profession, and so can you. All it takes is a pile of hard work, a firm commitment to professional development, and dedication to excellence. But let them tell you.
I think with every profession, perfection is what brings people to the top. Never settling, never saying that's good enough.
I think to be successful in any type of sport or business, you have to give 100%.
And it's just like any normal mechanic on the service floor. He can aspire to be the head of the service department, and with hard work and continuing education and knowledge, he can get there.
The dealer incentive is to keep the customers happy, and they got a lot of quotas to meet, a lot of service standards to meet, and it's important that they and us look at everything in a positive manner, no matter what's going on, to keep the Dodge team up front.
Well, in our sport, the biggest thing is it's a team, and we are only as good as our weakest link. So we try to get everybody up to speed. Everybody has to pull in the same direction. If you don't pull in the same direction, the car quits running real quick, and it goes like that really in any kind of business. You got to have everybody pulling one direction. Everybody's got to have the good attitude to work together and to be able to cover everybody. And if you can get all that going, success is endless.
Now, let's meet the 5 Ultimate Race Weekend winners, hear their questions, and get the answers from the Dodge crew chiefs. In the Northeast Business Center, Philadelphia's own, Steve Woods is a service tech with Burke Brothers in North Cape May, New Jersey. Steve's winning question is, who makes the call on which adjustments to make and how much adjustment is needed during a race? Is it the driver, the crew chief, or is it a team effort? Well, Steve, it varies.
The actual call will probably be made by the crew chief, but it's only after input from the driver, from his motor man, from his shock man, from his chassis man.
The final call ends up coming on me, and if I make a call and Bill doesn't feel strongly about it, we'll discuss it at that point. But the majority of the time, the crew chief makes the call.
We kind of call our calls a community call, so we all agree on the call, and we may have 3 different decisions, but at the end of the day, we all agree to one decision.
From the Memphis zone in the Southeast Business Center, Stephen Mellinger is with Gupton Motors in Clarksville, Tennessee. Stephen asked about transmissions for his winning entry. Do NASCAR teams change transmission gear ratios or use different transmissions from tracks like Daytona and Talladega to shorter tracks such as Bristol and Martinsville, or road courses like Sears Point and Watkins Glen?
We do change transmission ratios. We're dealing with different tires at different racetracks. The thing that we try and set the transmission up for is restarts. With different tire sizes week in and week out, the restart speeds of the racetrack, NASCAR dictates. We have that information, and we know the power curves of our engines, so we'll gear the transmission to try and get optimum restarts, and that does change every week.
For the most part, a lot of teams will stay with the same transmission combinations. A lot of teams, though, do work on transmission ratios strictly from a starting the race standpoint and getting the green flag to try to run through the gears as quick as we can. We know what our pit road speed is. We base that as our minimum. We know how fast we want to go, so we try to cut the gears up so the driver can get going as fast as he can on a restart.
Our next winner is out of the Cincinnati zone in the Midwest Business Center. Jim Meyer is a 17-year service technician working at Kingswood Chrysler in Loveland, Ohio. Jim's question was on the one condition a crew chief can't control in racing, the weather. We've heard how engine performance in race cars falls off on hot, humid days due to the decreased density of the fuel-air mixture. What is the optimum temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure for NASCAR racing?
Well, that's a good question. Every area is different in the United States that we have to deal with, and we're probably looking around 60, 65 degrees.
Really, we run in so many different conditions that it's hard to say there's an optimum. I guess optimum would be the cooler weather with the drier air and high pressure would be optimum, but we run in so many different conditions, our engine tuners have to really be on top of the conditions and tune for it.
Rick Weiler is a technician at McLean Motors in Newton, Illinois in the Southwest Business Center's St. Louis zone. Rick's subject was very specific. How do you proportion the brakes to help a Winston Cup car handle in extreme situations?
Well, a lot of that will depend upon the track. The shorter tracks and the road courses, we probably run brake proportion more to 50-50 front to rear to get a little more stopping power. A lot of times if we try to run something like that on a high-speed bank track, the cars will tend to get a little bit loose. So we'll put more to the front to get the drivers the security they need when they use a brake pedal.
We go off a brake balance bar. The front brake and the rear brake have a different master cylinder, and we proportion that into a high pressure, a little bit more pressure in the front than the back, and then the driver will go out there and make a run and adjust accordingly to that. But we're probably looking at about 150 to 200 pound front to rear brake split, and then the driver uses his knowledge and what he's feeling through the corner on braking to change that accordingly.
Our last Ultimate Race Weekend winner is Eric Pang of Cutter Dodge Dillingham in Honolulu, Hawaii, in the LA zone of the West Business Center. Eric's question: dealership technicians are evaluated by such measures as fixed first visit and fix-it-right scores. How are Winston Cup pit crew and race shop technicians trained and their respective performances evaluated?
Really, we try to do a lot of in-house training and set up programs so that they can learn the skills of their job in-house, because NASCAR race cars are much different than a street vehicle.
And our performances are all evaluated come Sunday. For us, everything that we do shows in a short amount of time.
The performances of our guys are evaluated each and every day throughout the whole year. We see a guy that's doing that's improved a tremendous amount. We may move them up to a different position and give them the opportunity to advance, throughout the organization.
The mechanics in the Winston Cup division are really evaluated a lot like they are in the dealerships. We look at who shows initiative, attitude, who can get the job done the quickest, who can get it done right. It's the biggest thing we can't stand is to do redos. It just takes too much time, and our schedule's too defined to have that going on.
We cannot make mistakes. If we do, that reflects in the performance of the car. And when that happens, it's there for the world to see.
There you have it, the inside information on what it takes to stay competitive from the guys who know. Thanks to all you service techs who sent in questions for the Ultimate Race Weekend. Even though the contest is now wrapped up, we invite you to email your comments, questions, and suggestions to Mastertech headquarters. The address is mastertech@pentamark.com.